All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our celebration of National Science Week 2024 here at CSIRO. My name is Dr. Samantha Monroe, and I am an ecologist here at CSIRO, and I am also your host for today's webcast. Now, when we found out that this year's theme for National Science Week was species survival, we absolutely knew we wanted to put something together to reach out to schools on this really important topic. Currently, there are 1,700 different species all across Australia that are threatened with extinction. So this is a really big problem that we all need to work together to solve. Now, today, we're going to be talking about one of the species that might be in a bit of trouble, and that is, of course, our amazing and iconic koala. Today, we want to talk to you about a program we have at CSIRO that's been created to count koalas, work out how many koalas there actually are in Australia, and also where they live. This program is called the National Koala Monitoring Program. We're also going to talk to you about how you can help us count koalas and become a bit of a scientist yourself. And at the end, you will get a chance to ask us some of your best koala questions. Now, before we get started, it is really important to acknowledge that we are all coming together today from many different parts of the country. So I would like to begin by acknowledging the Bindal and Wulgurukaba people, who are the traditional owners of the land that I am speaking from today up in North Queensland, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. A couple quick housekeeping notes for everyone. If for whatever reason you can't hear me right now, you have clicked the muted button. So you're going to want to unmute me. That controls whether or not you can hear me, not whether or not I can hear you. You can also control the volume of today's presentation and add closed captioning using the options at the bottom of the screen. Now, as I mentioned, you will be able to ask some koala questions at the end, and you can submit these using a Q&A function. On the side of your screen, you should see a little chat icon with a question mark over it. Click on that, and a panel will open up where you can submit your questions. And feel free to do this throughout the presentation, and we'll get to as many as we can once we're done. Finally, if for whatever reason the stream buffers or stops, don't panic. Just refresh your browser or log back in, and it should start working. Okay, with the housekeeping out of the way, it's time to get into the science. And we thought it would be a good idea to start with a little introduction of who we are. Now, if you've never heard of CSIRO before, that's okay. All you really need to know is that we are Australia's national science agency. We have over 6,000 people who work at CSIRO all over the country, and we study pretty much everything from tiny little bacteria to stars in galaxies far, far away. In a nutshell, it is our job to try and understand how the world works and come up with new ideas to make Australia a better place. Now, again, even if you've never heard of us before, I promise you have used something that we have invented. A few of what I think are some of our greatest inventions include things like AeroGuard bug spray. That's pretty essential if you live in Australia. Plastic money. We've contributed to the discovery of vaccines, and even the Wi-Fi connection you are probably using right now to watch this webcast was in part invented by CSIRO. So a lot of cool stuff coming out of CSIRO all the time. Now, of course, one of the big projects that we're working on is what we're going to be talking about today, which is the National Koala Monitoring Program, which again is all about how we count koalas and work out where they live. Now, our team thought it might be fun to start off with a few of our absolute favorite koala facts. And we think one of the most important things everybody should know about koalas is that they need healthy forests to survive. Koalas live in eucalypt forests. They live up in the trees, and their diet consists of pretty much just one thing, eucalyptus leaves. So this means if we don't have healthy forests, the koalas won't have anywhere to live, and they also won't have anything to eat. And what's interesting about their diet as well, these leaves that they're eating, is eucalyptus leaves are typically poisonous for everything else. So you definitely don't want to eat them. But koalas have evolved to deal with the toxins in eucalyptus leaves. So they're one of the few species that can actually eat this thing. Now, in case you're wondering what they're doing all day up in those trees, well, the truth is, not very much. Koalas actually spend most of their time sleeping. They spend about 18 hours a day fast asleep up in those trees. That's why if you have been lucky enough to see a koala in the wild, they're usually having a snooze. Now, coming back to what I was mentioning about eucalyptus leaves, this brings us to another really important fact about koalas, which is that they're actually very picky eaters. Now, I mentioned koalas eat the leaves of eucalyptus trees, but there's actually 700 different types of eucalyptus trees across the country. And koalas only eat the leaves from about 30 or 40 of these, so they're quite picky. Not only that, they will also often choose to eat the leaves at the top of the tree because these tend to be more nutritious. So I know when you see a koala munching down like this one, gobbling up everything in sight, it looks like it'll just eat anything that it finds that's green, but in fact, they have very particular tastes. The other thing that is important to know about koalas is that they're not the type of animal to get together with their friends and family and share a big meal of those eucalyptus leaves. Koalas are actually highly solitary creatures. This means that they are not very social and prefer to live alone. Koalas are what we call territorial, which means they have their own area of the forest and their own trees that they like to live in and spend their time in, and they absolutely do not want to share. Now, what this means is if you ever encounter a koala in the wild, I know they look really cute and cuddly. I spend a lot of my workday just looking at photos of koalas. I know how cute they are, but you definitely don't want to give them a hug. They will not want you to touch them or give them a cuddle. It can actually really stress them out if they interact too much with people. So unless the koala that you see is injured or in need of immediate help, you shouldn't touch them because it can really stress them out. All right, this next little fact I want to share with you is probably one of my favorite funny things about koalas that a lot of people don't know, which is that compared to most other mammals, how do I put this nicely? Koalas have unusually small brains, and I can show you a picture of what a koala brain looks like. So you can see they're pretty tiny, and this is why, unfortunately, a lot of people tend to say that they're not that smart. If you're curious about exactly how small their brain is, it only weighs about 19 grams, which is roughly the same as 4 glass marbles. So the next time you are outside playing with marbles, hold 4 of them in your hand, and that's it. That's all there is to a koala brain. But in the case of the koala, having a small brain can actually be a pretty bright idea. Because remember, a koala's average day doesn't have a lot going on. They spend 18 to 20 hours asleep, they wake up to eat, they wake up to poop, and then they go back to sleep, and that's pretty much their typical day. And you just don't need a big, smart, complex brain to do that kind of thing when that's most of what you're doing. When you're spending most of your time sleeping, you just don't need a really complex brain, excuse me, that requires a lot of energy. So better to have a smaller brain that doesn't take as much energy to run. And the last thing I wanted to share with you is that although koalas do spend most of their time sleeping and often tend to be alone, they are still excellent mothers. Koala mothers give their babies a pouch to live in, and they feed them milk to help them grow strong. For the first 6 months of their lives, koala babies will live in their mother's pouch, but eventually they get way too big and it's time to move out. But instead of fully moving out, they just sort of climb onto their mother's back and hang out there for another 6 months. So their poor mother has to climb up and down trees with a baby on their back. After about a year, the koala mother is getting ready to have another baby, and her first baby will start to become a lot more independent. But in general, koala mothers are quite nurturing and protective and are just all around great moms. All right, now that our very big complex brains are full of koala facts, I'm going to hand the rest of this presentation over to Dr. Andrew Hoskins, who is the leader of the National Koala Monitoring Program here at CSIRO. And he's going to tell us more about how we count koalas and all the cool technology we use to do that. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Sam. So how cool were some of those koala facts? Here at the National Koala Monitoring Program, we really love counting koalas, but we don't just do it for fun. We do it so we can have the best possible information to support koala conservation. Koalas are what we call an umbrella species, which means that by protecting koalas, we can also protect all of the animals that live alongside them. And depending on where you are, can really change how many koalas you might see. Did you know that koalas in New South Wales, Queensland, and the ACT are actually endangered? Which means that without our help, these populations may go extinct. And you can also find them in Victoria and South Australia, but these populations are doing okay. In fact, in some places in Southern Australia, there are too many koalas. Can you imagine that? So Sam already told you about how koalas live in trees and eat eucalypt leaves. And we were just learning that koalas live in the eastern and southern parts of Australia. But you may be thinking, where can I find a koala in these areas? So the map that you can see here is where we at the National Koala Monitoring Program think koalas are most likely to occur. So those green areas are where we really think there's quite a high probability that koalas live. And those browny pink areas are areas where we think there's a much lower probability or we're uncertain that there's koalas living there. But you could really potentially find koalas in any one of these areas. You may also think that all across the country, koalas look the same, but that's not actually true. So koalas up here in Northern Australia, where Sam and I are calling from, are much smaller and they're more adapted to managing the hot environments that they live within. So they're smaller, they have shorter fur and smaller ears to help them, or larger ears, sorry, to help them remove heat. The koalas down in Southern Australia are larger and with denser fur and smaller hairs to help them conserve heat and stay warm in those cold environments. And we all probably know what a koala looks like, right? If you see a koala, you can identify it. But can you see the koala in this picture? Is there a koala there? It's right here. And this is one of the challenges when it comes to counting koalas and for the National Koala Monitoring Program to develop the best understanding of how many koalas there are right across the country. It's that while koalas are really easy to recognize, they can be actually quite hard to spot and count in the wild. So to help us get around that, we use a whole bunch of different technologies and approaches to really understand where koalas are right around the country. I'm going to talk to you now about some of the different ways that we as scientists and you can help us look for koalas. One of the first methods that we can use to count koalas is we can look for the signs that the koalas leave behind. So koalas leave scratches on trees as they're climbing up their trunks, and we can find those scratches and know that a koala has been there. Also, even though the koalas are hiding high up in the trees, when they poo, that poo lands on the ground. And we can go around and we can find that poo. And if we find that poo, we know that there was a koala sleeping in the tree and that koala did a bit of a poo and it landed on the ground. One of the other ways that we can look for koalas is we can spot them from the sky using drones. So koalas are mammals. It means they're warm-blooded, and it means that they're warmer than the environment that they're sitting in. So we can use a drone to actually look for those heat signatures of koalas and spot the warm koala sitting in the relatively cooler tree and know that there's a koala there much better than we can with our own eyes. Another way we can find koalas is we can actually listen to the boys when they're singing for the girls. So during the breeding season, male koalas go out and they call for their girls to try and find a mate. And it's those calls that we can find and record using sound recorders that we leave in the environment. So I'm going to play you now a koala call so you can hear what a boy koala sounds like when he's out there looking for one of his girls. So that call that you can hear may not sound very, very nice or pretty to us, but in the koala world and in koala language, that's a lovely singing voice. Now, one of the other ways that we can help count koalas, and this is one of the ways that we really want everybody on this call and to help get involved and help contribute information into the National Koala Monitoring Program, is we can also spot them from the ground using our eyes. So koalas may be hard to spot, but we can actually spot them. And CSIRO and the National Koala Monitoring Program have developed the Koala Spotter app, which you can get on your smartphones now and download. And if you see a koala in the wild while you're out there with your parents looking, you can record that sighting and send it directly to us. And you'll know that that information has been used in the best possible way we can to support koala conservation and help us get a better understanding of where koalas are around the country, how many koalas there are right across the country, as well as how the koala populations within your local regions are changing through time. And that's one of the key pieces of information that we need to make better conservation decisions. So recently, we were out in the Redlands Coast region testing out some of these different koala monitoring methods, and we filmed a bit of a video. We thought we'd play that to you now so you can see what it's like to use some of these methods out in the bush.
The National Koala Monitoring Program is using the best technology and analytics to come up with the best estimates we can of koala populations and distributions right around the country. Today we're here in the Redlands Coast region, and we're going to show you some of the many ways that we look for koalas under the National Koala Monitoring Program. We can do this using thermal drones looking for koalas from above, or looking for koala poos using things like detection dogs. We also use acoustic recorders, which let us hear koalas in the environment, or we can use our eyes and just walk around looking for them and counting them ourselves. We also have citizen science apps that we are able to use that lets anybody come out, look for koalas and spot them and bring that information back into the National Koala Monitoring Program.
Hi, my name is Dr. Roman Cristescu, and this is Summer here. And we are from Detection Dog for Conservation at the University of the Sunshine Coast. So basically what they do is they help us find koala scats. And through their scats, we know that koala live in the habitat. And so we are really detecting and mapping koala habitats. And then often we also want to know health, koala's health. And so for that, we deploy what we call genetic detection dog. And that dog takes us to the very fresh scats. We collect the scats and we bring them back to the lab. So basically, we were searching the landscape for koala scats, and Austin got very excited and suddenly he dropped. And so that's his indication that he's got something. So what I do then, I ask him to show me, because it's still really hard to find a scat in that, very complex litter. And so he pointed the scat with his nose, and here it is. So with the National Koala Monitoring Program, we've been doing actually a lot of different method testing. So we're really keen to always know the strengths and limitation of the different innovation that we do for koala conservation. So from detection using dog or acoustic recorder, to density, to health measure. All the methods have pros and cons, and they have strengths and limitation. And only by knowing that really well, we'll be able to select the best method and really get accurate data on koala. We just have one of our koala coming down the tree. We saw him before, and there was quite a lot of birds activity, and we thought potentially he was being harassed by the birds. And so he's just come down. You can see that he's both got a collar and an ear tag. So the collar is so that we know its location through the landscape. Especially here, there's a lot of houses, there's a lot of roads. We really want to know how we can manage those safely. So those little Bluetooth koala ear tag are really essential link between citizen scientists and koala conservation. Basically, thanks to that little tag, people can report where koala are, but also who is where. So linking each individual koala to their home range and which other koala are in their home range and sharing that life with them. It's very critical because all that data enables government, for instance, to make decisions on where to conserve koala habitat. And it also is a way to train every one of us to become protector or guardians of our koala, because we can learn how to recognize when a koala is sick and report it through the app. And then we can get in touch through the app with local wildlife carer. And those people are amazing citizens who come, rescue koala, and bring them to hospital so they can get treated and released and back into the wild.
The National Koala Monitoring Program has created an app called Koala Spotter, which lets people record koala sightings no matter where they are. So if you're out walking in town or on a bushwalk or at the park and you spot a koala, you can take a picture, record your location, and send that data to us. The data you collect using the app gets sent to our National Koala Sightings database. And from there, we use that information to create maps of where they live, how many koalas there are, and also whether or not they're healthy. We've deliberately designed this app so that anybody, no matter their age, can use this and get out there and have some fun. And believe it or not, most of the data that we've gotten through this app so far has come from family and kids who are just out together on an adventure.
We're really trying to make sure we can look at all of the different monitoring approaches and technologies that are out there for koalas and use them in a best practice way to allow us to tell that national story of the koala.
All right, everybody, that more or less brings us to the end of our planned presentation. Just wanted to say a very big thank you to the many, many partners that are involved in the National Koala Monitoring Program. Science is very much a team sport. So you can see from this little slide all the different universities and agencies that we work with to collect all of this data. So none of what you see would be possible without a lot of teamwork. All right, so that moves us into the part where we answer some of your koala questions. So Andrew, the very first one that we've got here is, how many babies will a koala have in their lifetime?
All right, so koalas can have about one baby a year for a female koala, and they can do that for about 10 years. So really, on average, in a female koala's lifetime, they'll have about 10 babies.
Awesome. All right. And there are a lot of questions I can see here about what koalas eat. So we're going to have a few questions about their diet. I guess the first thing they want to know is, how much do koalas eat each day? We talked about they only eat eucalyptus leaves, so how much of those leaves do they need to eat each day to survive?
So was that how much they need to eat to survive?
Yeah, they wanted to know in terms of weight,
Okay,
I guess.
so
maybe you don't have to count the number of individual leaves.
I wouldn't guess at individual leaves, just because depending on how big the leaves are will really change how many leaves a koala could eat. But eucalyptus leaves are, there's not much energy in a eucalyptus leaf for a koala, so they have to eat quite a few. And it's somewhere around 300 to 500 grams of eucalyptus leaves every day that a koala needs to eat to survive.
And when you think about how much time they're spending sleeping, that means most of the time that they're awake, they've just got to be eating to get all of that food. Yeah, it's a pretty average day for them. Sleep, eat. That's basically what they do most of the time. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of questions here. So sticking with the questions about what they eat, are there specific types of trees that they like more than others?
This is one of the really cool things about koalas. So yeah, there are specific types of eucalyptus trees that koalas prefer over others, but it really depends on the area that you're in. So just like us, individual koalas and individual populations of koalas prefer different types of food. So some areas koalas will like to eat one tree, but in another area, they may not eat that tree and they may prefer to eat another. It's this really interesting, complex relationship that you wouldn't necessarily expect from an animal that browses on just leaves.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Oh, I can see we've only got 5 minutes, so let's get through as many of these as we can. So sticking with the food, because there's so many questions about food, how long does it take? Because we talked about how eucalyptus leaves are poisonous for most people. So if you don't eat them, if you're watching this, don't go out and be like a koala and eat eucalyptus leaves. That's a bad idea. But how long does it take them to digest a big meal of leaves?
Yeah, it can take quite a while, because leaves are quite hard to digest, right? Like even if eucalyptus leaves weren't poisonous, can you imagine like eating a handful of like these hard sort of woody leaves and then trying to digest those? So for koalas to do that, they need to chew them up really, really good and get them really, really small and then swallow them. And it takes quite a long time for their guts to digest them. It can take up to about 4 days from a sort of one meal to move through a koala before it poos it out and it lands on the ground.
That is a really long time. That is a really long time for a meal. So there's also some questions about counting koalas. And there's a year 3 class that would like to know how many koalas there are out there with collars on them, like we saw in the video.
Look, it really depends on the region that you're in. So the area that we're in the Redlands Coast, there's maybe, and I'm probably going to get the number wrong here, so there's probably about 8 or 10 koalas at the moment that are collared. But then there's areas in New South Wales where they've collared quite a large number of koalas as well. And it depends on the scientific study that the individual groups are doing to understand their movement. So it's one of those questions that, yeah, it really depends on where you are and, you know, which group is working on them and what are the questions that they're trying to answer.
Well, following on from that, this isn't a surprising question and a really important one, which is how many koalas are actually out there, Andrew? Do we know?
Yeah, so we have an estimate of how many koalas there are out there nationally. And this is one of the biggest challenges because as we told you, they're really hard to count in the wild and they're ranged across a really broad area. So we need the best available information we can at a really large scale before we can get a really good estimate. At the moment, we're estimating that nationally there's between 224 and 524,000 right across the country. As more and more of your sightings from Koala Spotter start to come in, we can help refine that estimate and get our counts much more precise.
And that's what we're trying to do every single day, right? The whole
Exactly.
big team of us working on that question. It's a really good question that we're still trying to answer. So this kind of relates to this. I think this is a really good one too. It's really important, is how are people impacting koala populations?
There's a whole range of ways that people are impacting koala populations. So koalas have to live in trees. They have to eat eucalypts to live. And a lot of the activities that we do to help humans live and humans survive, like grow food and you know, make places for us to live, means we have to clear those trees. And loss of those trees means that koalas run out of the places to live. Other ways is koalas like to live in areas that people like to live in. So there are some really prominent urban koala populations. And in those areas, koalas come into contact with people, also their dogs, quite frequently. So dogs can attack koalas. So your dog in your backyard, if you're in an area with koalas, it could attack a koala, injure it. And koalas also, in these urban areas, need to cross roads because those roads pass through all of their different habitat and they can get hit by cars, which again can really impact koala populations.
Yes, there's a lot of different ways that humans and koalas interact that we need to be aware of for sure. Now, this is a fun one because we were going to talk about this in our original presentation and we ran out of time, but there's some students who would like to know whether or not koalas drink water. And if they do, where do they get it from?
So koalas don't drink water, or they're not observed to drink water that frequently. And a lot of their moisture that they get comes from the leaves that they eat. But it's not that they don't drink water all the time. So they can drink water in a number of different ways. They can drink water out of pools of water that are pooling in the trees, so in the forks of the trees, and they can drink water as it runs down the bark of the trees, or they might need to, if there's no other water available, come down out of the tree and find a water source to drink from. But again, really, koalas get the majority of their water from the leaves that they eat. And some of these other ways that they drink is really to help supplement their water when it's, you know, it's a dry time, maybe in summer and it's not raining that much.
And is it ever a good idea to give a koala water from a bottle, Andrew?
Look, it looks great, and we've probably all seen some of the videos about giving koalas water from a bottle. but you have to be really, really careful. So if you need to give koala water and you're in a situation where there is a dehydrated and thirsty koala, give it a bowl of water to drink from, because by pouring it out of the bottle, you could accidentally drown the koala, because what happens is the koala breathes in the water as it's coming down the bottle, and that can really hurt the koala and possibly kill it.
Yep, so we've got to be very careful when we're trying to help. All right. I think we've got about 1 more minute, so I don't know if there's going to be classes logging off, and there's dozens of questions that unfortunately we just can't get to them all. But there are resources for teachers, and they can reach out to our program, and we can try to answer those questions later on after the webcast. So make note of your questions and feel free to send them to us. I think I want to make sure I get this one in for you, Andrew, which is, you've been working on koalas for quite a long time now. Is there something that you have learned or discovered about koalas that you have just thought, that's amazing, and what a cool thing about this species?
That's a really good question. So, look, I think one of the most amazing things about koalas is just how adaptable they are to the different environments that we find them in. So they're all over the place. And when we start to look, we find more and more. So, they can be found, right up here in North Queensland, in really remote areas that are quite dry and hot. And then you get them all the way down in Victoria and South Australia, where it's cold, wet, and rainy. And koalas have evolved and adapted over the years to really live and survive in all of these different environments. And I think that's super cool, because you don't get many animals that can survive across such a wide range of areas.
Okay, so I think we're going to be, I wanted to make sure we got that one in before any students had to log off, but we do have a few minutes. Quite a few people have been asking, so I'll try and get as many of these as we can before the students have to go. Quite a few students have been asking, how long do koalas live?
Yeah, so in the wild, koalas can live for about 10 to 15 years. So they're pretty long-lived, probably about as long as people's dogs, really.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Let's see, there's so many questions to go through. Oh, a few people are wondering how big the koalas can get. We talked about how there's differences between north and south, but I think a few of the students would like to know just how big they can get.
Yeah, so there are differences between north and south, and one of those is body size. Koalas can range somewhere between, well, it's quite a wide range. They can range between 4 and 15 kilos. So some of those big male koalas can get up to 15 kilos, it's a pretty heavy koala. What's that in dog terms? That's like a Labrador size dog.
That's about the size of my toddler, and I can tell you when I've got to pick her up off the ground, it's pretty heavy. That's about the size of a 3-year-old, my 3-year-old. All right. Oh, a few people would like to know whether or not koalas can swim.
They can. So yeah, a lot of animals can swim that you wouldn't expect, and koalas are one of them. So they can swim when they need to, but they don't like to swim.
Right. Just looking through some of these questions. Oh, a few people were wondering, we got to listen to the boy koala singing to the girl. What does it sound like if the girl thinks that sounds very attractive and would like to answer back?
The girls do call, but they don't necessarily sing back to the boys. So the girls also have their own vocalizations, and koalas can communicate to each other vocalizing. Boy calls are really deep, kind of like people. Boy calls are really deep, and then the girls are a much higher pitched call and a bit squeakier.
Yeah, it's a pretty high pitched sound, isn't it? It's a pretty high pitched squeal, actually. Yes. I'm sure if the teachers did a little Googling, they could find a video that shows you what that sound looks like. It can be pretty deafening. And
if you're in the bush and you heard a male or a female koala without knowing what they are, you'd probably be pretty frightened, wouldn't you? Like they're quite extreme from a human perspective.
Well, I grew up in Canada, and the first time I heard a possum, which has a very similar kind of growl in a tree, I got a little bit scared. I didn't know what it was. So yeah, I think if you didn't know it was a koala, you might get a little frightened. So obviously the kids are often seeing in the news sometimes that koalas are not well, and they see koalas in videos that need help. Some of them would like to know, what do you do if you see a koala in a tree or maybe on the ground and it doesn't look very well?
Yep. So the first thing to do yourself, I wouldn't approach the koala and I wouldn't try to handle the koala, because a sick and injured koala can, in trying to, it's frightened, it's really scared. And because it's scared, it could try to defend itself and you might get hurt. But what you can do is look up one of your local care organizations. So you can call places like Wires or any other local koala care organization, and they'll send a carer out who can come and do an assessment on that koala. If it needs to go into care and be rehabilitated, then they'll be the ones who are able to catch it and bring it into care and take care of it before releasing it again.
Absolutely. You need very specialist training to handle animals in the wild, and it really depends on the animal as well, the training that you need. And you and I have seen koala claws up close plenty of times. You do not want to mess with a koala. Those claws are pretty sharp. They're designed for climbing, but yeah, they're
exactly
pretty sharp.
Designed for climbing, but when they're scared, they'll use them to protect themselves. So you have to be careful.
Absolutely. All right. Oh, here's a good one. One that we've talked about actually recently, you and I. What types of predators do koalas have to deal with?
That is a really good one. So there's a couple of different natural predators that koalas have to deal with. And it really depends on where you are in the country and what other animals are in the area. So dingoes are one of those natural predators, and they'll capture and hunt koalas when they're on the ground. Some of the other animals that can get them is, you'd be surprised, particularly some of those people down in southern Australia, but further north, carpet snakes. Carpet snakes can eat quite a large number of koalas up in a tree. Other things like large birds of prey can get them as well. So wedge-tailed eagles are able to get them. So it's really those predators, those large predators that can handle an animal as big as a koala.
And that's why their camouflage is so important, because that's where they're hiding from when they're up in those trees. So sometimes it's tough for us because we need to go out and spot these koalas. And it's like, oh, I wish these were easier to find, but they are trying to hide from all of those predators that might be trying to get them. All right, here's another one that I think is a really important one. Do koalas carry viruses?
Yes. All animals carry viruses, actually. So just like people, just like any other animals, koalas can carry viruses as well, and a range of other diseases. So, and those viruses and diseases can negatively impact koalas, just like they can negatively impact people. And one of the challenges for koala populations is when they're under a whole bunch of other pressures. So there's things like when they're losing their habitat, or maybe animals are getting hit by cars, or they don't have enough leaves to eat, those sorts of things, then the impact that these viruses and these diseases can have on koalas and koala populations gets increased and magnified. That's one of the biggest challenges with koala health, is it's the combined impact of all of these different things that means, what might have been just a cold for a koala before turns that cold into something that's a lot worse, and that really impacts the koala.
There's a few questions here about the technology that we use as well. There's a couple of questions here about drones. So I'm assuming there's a few people out there who may have drones themselves or get to use them. They can be a lot of fun. One person was wondering, do we have pilots who fly them live and manually steer them, or do they get pre-programmed and they just follow a specific route that we set?
Both, actually. So it depends on who's doing the survey. So we try to use the drones to survey a specific area, most of the time flying in a lawnmower pattern. So you can pre-program the drone, or you can manually fly it to go up and down and record the area that you're looking for. What we do is we have the pilots then on the ground who are then looking at the video feed that's coming from the drone to identify when they potentially see a koala. There's a lot of work going on in the background at the moment to, use some of the latest artificial intelligence algorithms to help us automatically identify koalas from drones. but teams are still working on that challenge. So at the moment, the best way that people are really using drones is they're manually flying them, or they're sort of between manual and automatic. They're letting the drone fly an automatic path, but they're watching it manually to then take control of the drone and inspect to see if that what looks like a koala or hot blob is actually a koala. And even drones aren't perfect at spotting koalas. I think a really good example, which was sent to us from one of our collaborators just yesterday. So they've been out flying drones in North Queensland, looking for koalas. And unfortunately, they didn't find anywhere they were looking, but they showed me some really, really good examples of when some things may look like a koala from a thermal drone, and it's really not. One of those ones was are these arboreal termite mounds. So you can get termites up in the trees, and it's a blob of a nest of termites that are sitting there. And through the thermal drone, that looks a lot like a koala, like it's the same sort of shape and size, sitting in the same sort of places of the trees. So it can be a really tough challenge, even when you're using something like a drone.
Well, this is actually leads us very nicely into another question someone had, which is, do you know if CSIRO uses drones to see other things? Do we use drones to look at other animals?
We use drones for a whole range of different things. So we use drones to look at the distribution of weeds. So both in the environment as well as in our agricultural zones. We use drones to look at the health of crops. So we can use them to fly them around and look at the health of crops. We've also used them in some of these more remote places in Northern Australia to look for things like buffaloes or feral pigs. So there's a whole wide range of different ways we can use drones, and we do use drones to help us in our everyday work. Another really cool example that I think is some teams use them to better understand the health of waterholes or billabongs up here in Northern Australia. So they can map out these billabongs regularly to better understand the condition of those and how those billabongs are changing through time.
All right, so we're going to have to wrap up soon. So I think it would be good to answer a couple questions about how to use the app, because there are a few of those. One question, I've got two that I think are good. One question is, what should we do? How do we tell if there's a joey in the pouch? And what do we do? How do we mark it if we do see a mother koala with her baby? How do we record that in the app?
So it can be quite hard to tell if there's a joey in the pouch, and we don't expect people to, give us with certainty that they've seen a joey in the pouch. So you've really got to look for that moving bulge when the joey's getting bigger, or even making sure that you can see the joey poking its head out of the pouch. In the Koala Spotter app, there's a number of questions you can answer about the koala, and one of those is, does it have a joey? What we recommend is there's three options. There's yes, there's no, and those are if you're certain. You're certain that there wasn't a joey, or yes, you saw a joey and you can record it. There's also, I'm unsure. If you're not sure, just click unsure, and that's really good information for us.
We click that button a lot, don't we?
We do.
Because it's very hard to tell when they're very high up in the tree. It's very hard to tell. All right, the last question, and again, I am so sorry. I can see there are tons more. I did my best to get through as many as possible. To all of the teachers, if the students are really keen, please feel free to contact the National Koala Monitoring Program and myself and Andrew or another member of the team. We promise we will find those answers for you. But the last one I think is really good to ask about the app is, what does someone do if they're walking around and they're looking for a koala, but they happen to see another rare animal? Do we want them to record that as well?
Absolutely. So, well, Koala Spotter is called Koala Spotter, and we really want you to spot koalas. We really want you to record whatever other animals you see as well. So you can record and, well, hit a record and say, it's not a koala, leave us a note and say that you've seen something else. And our teams in the background will find that and will make sure that it's labeled as something that's not a koala. So one thing you can really be confident in is whenever you're sending information through the Koala Spotter app, we've always got teams that are looking at that data as it's coming through and making sure that we can validate and answer any questions or concerns that were raised about that sighting.
That's right. We're very careful when the data comes in. We check it, we recheck it, we check it a third time to make sure that those sightings are all right, and we're not mixing up different animals that people have recorded for sure. All right, everybody. Again, I am so sorry. I'm so happy to see all of these amazing questions on my screen. I'm so glad that everybody was interested and engaged. That's wonderful for us. We were so happy to talk to you about this today, but sadly, we are out of time, so we do need to wrap up. As I say, please submit any questions that we didn't get to. We will definitely get back to you as soon as we can with our answers. And just a huge thank you to everybody who helped put this together, all of our amazing partners with the program. And of course, on behalf of Andrew and myself, thanks everybody for coming in.
Thanks all. It's been really great talking to you.